This is also on Spotify now. Tonight, you are setting out across the waters of the Venetian lagoon, where merchants, sailors, and travellers quietly prepare for another day on one of medieval Europe's busiest trading routes. Together, you'll drift through peaceful canals, bustling harbours, and distant ports, discovering how ordinary journeys across the sea connected countless lives long before the modern world. Before we begin, take a quiet moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these slow, relaxing journeys through history are genuinely something you enjoy. And if you'd like, let us know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, settle in comfortably, and allow the sounds of the modern world to quietly fade away as our journey begins. The first hint of morning arrives not through light, but through sound. Somewhere beyond the wooden shutters, gentle footsteps cross worn stone, followed by the distant splash of water against timber piles. Venice is already awake, though the sky above the lagoon still holds the pale blue of night surrendering to dawn. You stand quietly beside a narrow canal, where the cool air carries the mingled scents of salt, damp wood, beeswax, and freshly baked bread drifting from ovens hidden among twisting streets. Nothing feels hurried. Even in one of Europe's busiest trading cities, the beginning of the day belongs to quiet routines. A small boat glides beneath a low bridge without disturbing the stillness. Its oars dip into the water with slow, practiced movements, leaving gentle circles that spread toward walls built upon countless timber foundations driven deep into the mud beneath the lagoon centuries earlier. Around you, houses of brick and pale stone seem to rise directly from the water itself. Their lower doors open toward canals instead of roads, reminding every visitor that Venice lives as much upon the sea as upon the land. You begin walking along a narrow quay where merchants, labourers, and apprentices quietly prepare for another day. Heavy bundles wrapped in coarse cloth rest beside warehouses whose doors remain closed for a little while longer. Coils of rope lie neatly arranged. Empty barrels wait to be filled again. No one raises their voice. Work begins with familiarity rather than urgency, each person already understanding their place in a city whose prosperity depends upon thousands of ordinary tasks completed with patient care. The morning breeze carries a faint cry from seabirds circling above the open lagoon. Looking eastward, beyond church towers and clustered rooftops, your eyes meet the broad stretch of water that connects Venice to distant shores. Somewhere beyond the horizon lie the coasts of Dalmatia, the mountains of Greece, the narrow straits of the Bosporus, and finally Constantinople, where Europe and Asia meet in one remarkable city. That destination feels impossibly distant from this peaceful waterfront, yet every voyage begins with a single quiet morning, much like this one. You continue through winding passages scarcely wide enough for two people walking side by side. Small shrines stand at corners where travellers briefly pause before continuing. Laundry hangs from upper windows, gently stirred by the breeze drifting inland from the lagoon. A baker places fresh loaves upon a wooden shelf outside his doorway. Their warm aroma lingers in the cool air, inviting passing workers to begin the day with simple nourishment. Such familiar scenes have greeted Venetians for generations, long before any particular merchant planned the journey you are about to share. As the city brightens, the outlines of its churches become clearer against the soft morning sky. Their bell towers rise above tiled roofs, offering landmarks to anyone navigating streets that often seem to fold back upon themselves. Bells do not ring together. Instead, one distant tone answers another, spreading slowly across the waterways. The sounds blend with the gentle creaking of moored vessels, rocking against their posts, creating a rhythm that belongs entirely to Venice. This is the 15th century, a time when the Republic of Venice stands among the great maritime powers of the Mediterranean. Its wealth did not emerge from fields or mines, but from movement. Ships arrive carrying spices from the eastern seas, silks woven far beyond Persia, fine cotton, wax, honey, timber, metals, glass, wool, and precious dyes. Few of these goods remain here for long. They continue onward through Europe, just as countless other products arrive from the West before beginning their own voyages toward Eastern markets. The city itself becomes less a destination than a meeting place, where journeys briefly cross before separating once more. You pause beside a canal, where several merchant vessels rest at their moorings. Their hulls show the marks of long service upon salt water. Sailcloth has been carefully folded. Masts rise quietly into the morning light. Men inspect ropes with practiced hands, checking knots almost without looking. A carpenter runs his fingers along a repaired plank, satisfied with work completed the previous evening. Nearby, another worker rubs oil into leather harnesses destined for pack animals waiting far beyond the sea. Every object hints at distance. Every tool belongs to movement. Walking onward, you arrive near one of the city's busy commercial quarters, where warehouses face both water and narrow streets. Doors begin opening one after another. Inside, careful order replaces clutter. Bales of wool stand stacked beside crates marked with merchants' symbols. Sacks of grain occupy one corner, while amphorae containing olive oil rest securely upon wooden racks. Everything has its place because confusion can easily become costly when goods must pass through many hands before reaching their final destination. A grey-haired clerk sits beside a sturdy table, preparing ink and parchment before the day's transactions begin. His records matter almost as much as the goods themselves. Every shipment must be counted, described, and acknowledged. Merchant families build their reputations upon trust, earned slowly across many years. A carefully written account can travel farther than the person who first recorded it, carried across seas and borders where agreements depend upon clear words rather than familiar faces. The city welcomes people speaking many languages. Passing through the market streets, you hear Venetian mingling with Greek, Latin, Arabic, German, and the languages of the Balkans. Most conversations remain practical. Prices are discussed quietly. Deliveries are confirmed. Ships expected from distant ports become subjects of calm speculation rather than anxious concern. Here, diversity feels ordinary because commerce has long encouraged understanding across cultures that might otherwise remain strangers. Your footsteps eventually carry you toward the broad open space surrounding the great basilica dedicated to Saint Mark. The morning sun now reaches its mosaics, causing tiny pieces of colored glass and gold to shimmer softly above the entrance. Pigeons wander across the paving stones, while early visitors cross the square at an unhurried pace. The basilica reflects influences gathered from many corners of the eastern Mediterranean, reminding every traveller that Venice has never looked only toward Western Europe. much of its identity has grown through centuries of exchange with Byzantium and lands beyond. Standing here, you begin to understand why the road, or more accurately the sea route, to Constantinople holds such importance. The two cities have shared centuries of cooperation, competition, admiration, and disagreement. Merchants have sailed between them, carrying far more than merchandise. Along these waters travel ideas, artistic traditions, engineering knowledge, religious influences, maps, stories, and practical skills learned in distant harbours. Every voyage quietly reshapes both ends of the journey. Leaving the square behind, you wander toward the waterfront, where larger vessels prepare for longer passages across the Adriatic Sea. Their crews move with calm confidence earned through repeated crossings. No one treats the voyage lightly, yet neither does anyone behave as though setting sail were extraordinary. For generations, these waters have served as familiar roads connecting cities separated by hundreds of miles. You notice barrels being rolled carefully across thick wooden planks, leading into a ship's hold. Each barrel receives deliberate attention. Weight must remain balanced. Fragile goods require protection from shifting cargo during rough weather. Rope, spare sailcloth, fresh water, dried beans, salted fish, hard bread, olive oil, and wine all find their places aboard. Long-distance travel depends upon thoughtful preparation more than boldness. Nearby, several horses wait patiently beneath simple coverings that protect them from the strengthening sunlight. They will not board this particular vessel, yet their presence reminds you that sea voyages rarely complete an entire journey. Roads beyond the coastline await travellers after ships reach their destination. Trade belongs equally to ships, animals, carts, rivers, and human footsteps. Every stage depends upon another. An older merchant named Alvis pauses beside the quay, studying the harbour before quietly greeting acquaintances passing nearby. His clothing speaks of comfort rather than luxury. A well-made wool robe suited to travel, sturdy leather boots, and a broad belt supporting a small purse and knife, intended for practical use. Those who know him nod respectfully without ceremony. Reputation, you sense, has been earned through reliability, rather than display. He notices your interest in the harbour and offers a simple observation. The sea teaches patience before it teaches profit. Nothing more needs to be said. After a gentle smile, he continues inspecting the preparations unfolding around him. You soon realize that this experienced traveller will become a familiar presence during at least part of the road ahead. He does not seek attention. Instead, his quiet confidence reflects the countless ordinary journeys that together have shaped the prosperity of Venice. As morning gradually becomes afternoon, sunlight dances upon the rippling canals. Gondolas carry local passengers through narrower waterways, while broader merchant boats move toward busier docks. Children pause beside bridges to watch vessels passing below. Women purchase vegetables from floating vendors, whose boats display onions, beans, herbs, apples, and leafy greens, arranged with surprising care. Life continues without interruption, because departures are woven naturally into the rhythm of the city. You find a quiet place overlooking the lagoon, where the breeze softens the warmth of the day. Looking east once again, the route begins to form within your imagination. First, the wide Adriatic, bordered by islands and rocky shores. Then, the waters of the Ionian and Aegean seas. Finally, the narrow passage leading toward Constantinople, where mighty walls rise above one of history's greatest crossroads. The distance feels immense, yet not impossible. Thousands have travelled before you, each leaving only faint traces behind while helping connect distant worlds. The afternoon slowly settles into a comfortable stillness. Craftsmen finish small repairs before evening. Sailmakers inspect folded canvas one final time. Warehouse doors begin closing after another day's careful work. The scent of wood smoke gradually joins the salty air as evening meals are prepared throughout the city. Across the canals, warm light begins appearing behind windows, reflected softly upon the water below. You stroll once more beside the harbour. Alvisa, whom you noticed earlier, now speaks quietly with the ship's captain while examining a rolled chart spread across a wooden crate. Their conversation remains calm, interrupted now and then by thoughtful silence. Routes depend upon weather, season, currents, and experience as much as upon maps. Decisions made here will influence many peaceful days, still waiting beyond the horizon. The bells of evening drift across Venice with slow, familiar certainty. Workers return home. Sailors finish securing lines before night. A few lanterns appear along the waterfront, their reflections stretching gently across darkening canals. Above them, the first stars begin emerging one by one over the quiet lagoon. Tomorrow will not begin with haste. There will still be supplies to inspect, clothing to arrange, provisions to secure, and companions to greet before any sail catches the morning wind. The journey to Constantinople has not yet truly begun, yet you already feel its steady pull carried upon the calm waters lying beyond the city. Venice rests peacefully behind you, while the eastern horizon waits with quiet patience for the moment of departure. The first sounds of the new day arrive before the light has fully settled across the lagoon. Somewhere nearby, an oar touches water with slow confidence, followed by the gentle knock of wood against a mooring post. A baker opens his shutters, releasing the comforting fragrance of warm bread into the cool morning air. The city seems to awaken one careful breath at a time. You rise with the same unhurried rhythm, feeling the quiet anticipation that belongs to journeys still waiting to begin, rather than those already underway. The streets remain comfortably empty as you make your way back toward the waterfront. Thin ribbons of mist drift across the smaller canals, softening the outlines of bridges and houses whose reflections ripple gently below. Stone beneath your feet still carries the coolness of the night, while the first touches of sunlight begin to warm the upper walls of the buildings, overlooking the water. Venice reveals itself differently at this hour. The busy marketplace has not yet found its voice, allowing smaller details to emerge. The careful sweeping of a doorway, the slow opening of heavy warehouse doors, the quiet exchange of greetings between neighbours who have begun countless mornings in much the same way. At the harbour, preparation has already become the day's purpose. No one appears rushed, yet everyone seems to know exactly what should happen next. Sailors loosen protective coverings from neatly furled sails, inspecting each fold for signs of wear. A cooper taps the iron hoops surrounding several barrels, listening closely to the sound each produces before nodding with quiet satisfaction. Nearby, 2 young apprentices carry baskets of dried figs and almonds toward a waiting vessel, placing them carefully alongside sacks of beans and coarse flour that will provide simple meals during the crossing. You pause to watch a woman filling glazed ceramic jugs with fresh water drawn from one of the city's carefully maintained cisterns. Venice itself offers little natural fresh water, relying instead upon an ingenious system that gathers rainwater beneath public squares and courtyards. The clear water stored there becomes one of the city's most valuable daily necessities. Long sea voyages demand even greater attention to such ordinary needs. Every jug filled today may become deeply appreciated many days from now when the nearest spring lies far beyond the horizon. The experienced merchant, Alvis, whom you noticed the previous day, stands quietly beside a stack of wooden chests. Morning light reveals more of the careful simplicity in his appearance. His robe is woven from durable wool suited to changing weather. A modest cloak rests folded over one arm, ready for cool evenings upon open water. His boots have clearly travelled many roads, yet each has been cleaned and repaired with care. Nothing he carries suggests unnecessary luxury. Every object seems chosen because experience has proven its usefulness. Without introducing himself formally, he gestures toward one of the chests resting nearby. A merchant who carries too much, he says softly, soon discovers that every mile becomes heavier. The remark is followed by a warm smile rather than a lesson. He lifts the lid, revealing neatly arranged bundles wrapped in linen. Fine woolen cloth occupies much of the space, protected carefully from moisture. Beside it rest smaller packages sealed with wax. Some contain delicate glassware crafted in Venetian workshops, admired throughout many ports of the Mediterranean. Others hold polished metal goods, carefully packed to survive the movement of ships and wagons alike. Each item represents months of skilled labour before ever beginning its journey eastward. You notice how little empty space remains inside the chest. Every corner has been thoughtfully used, not through haste, but through familiarity. Efficient packing allows more goods to travel while reducing movement that might damage fragile cargo during rough seas. Such knowledge rarely appears in official records, yet generations of merchants have quietly refined these practical skills through repeated voyages. Further along the quay, several scribes sit beneath shaded awnings, preparing documents that will accompany the cargo. Rolls of parchment lie weighted by smooth stones to prevent the morning breeze from disturbing their careful work. Names, quantities, destinations, partnerships, taxes, and agreements all find their place within precise lines of ink. A merchant's reputation often travels ahead through these documents long before the person arrives in another city. Clear records build confidence across distances where trust must survive weeks or months without direct communication. As the harbour grows busier, the variety of travellers becomes easier to notice. A Franciscan friar prepares for passage toward communities along the eastern Adriatic. His belongings fit comfortably within a single satchel. Nearby, two craftsmen discuss timber quality while examining replacement planks destined for repairs in another port. Several sailors from Dalmatia exchange familiar greetings in their own language before joining the crews with whom they have crossed these waters many times before. A physician carefully wraps small ceramic containers filled with dried herbs and medicines that may prove useful during the voyage. Their different purposes bring them together only briefly, yet each contributes quietly to the life of the ship. The vessel itself reveals more of its character now that morning light reaches every part of its deck. Its broad hull has been designed to carry substantial cargo while remaining capable of crossing open seas. Thick ropes disappear upward toward sturdy masts. Blocks and pulleys show the polished surfaces created by years of use. The deck bears small marks left by countless barrels, crates, coils of rope, and hard-working boots. Nothing appears new, yet everything speaks of careful maintenance rather than neglect. One sailor kneels beside a length of rope, patiently replacing worn fibers before they become a greater problem. Another checks the stitching along the edge of a sail, running rough fingertips across each seam. Such tasks receive no applause. They simply belong to the rhythm of preparing a ship that may soon depend upon every knot and every stitch. A short walk away, pack animals wait beneath the shade of a warehouse wall. Their presence reminds you that the sea carries only part of the journey. Strong mules and horses will eventually transport goods across roads leading inland from various ports. Their saddles are padded to reduce strain during long days of travel. Leather straps have been cleaned, repaired, and lightly treated with oil to remain flexible, despite changing weather. Even before leaving Venice, preparations quietly acknowledge landscapes still many weeks away. Alvise joins you again, while watching a blacksmith adjust several iron fittings intended for wagon repairs. He observes the careful work, without interruption, before speaking almost to himself. The road rewards those who prepare before the need appears. His words settle naturally into the morning, carrying the quiet certainty of long experience. You begin to understand that successful journeys rarely depend upon remarkable moments. Instead, they are built from countless small acts of attention repeated day after day. As the sun climbs higher, activity spreads beyond the harbour into neighbouring workshops. Rope makers continue twisting long fibres into heavy cables, strong enough to secure ships against shifting winds. Sailmakers inspect bolts of tightly woven canvas stretched across wooden frames. Nearby, coopers shape fresh barrels from carefully seasoned oak, fitting curved staves together with practiced precision. The fragrance of newly cut timber mingles pleasantly with tar warming beneath the growing sunlight. You wander through these working streets where every trade supports another. Glassmakers produce elegant vessels admired throughout Europe. Yet, those delicate creations first require crates built by carpenters, straw gathered by farmers for protection, ships maintained by sailors, merchants willing to transport them, and trustworthy partners waiting in distant markets. Commerce becomes less a series of individual transactions and more a living network sustained by ordinary people whose names rarely appear in chronicles. Near midday, workers pause for a simple meal. You find yourself seated beside several sailors on a low stone wall overlooking the water. Their lunch consists of coarse bread, olives, cheese, dried fish, and watered wine shared without ceremony. Conversation remains gentle, moving easily between weather, familiar harbours, changing currents, and families waiting at home. One sailor describes the scent of pine forests along the Dalmatian coast after rain. Another remembers dolphins, occasionally following ships through calm waters. Their memories speak not of adventure, but of familiarity. The sea has become a place of work, reflection, and quiet companionship. Alvise unwraps a small portion of smoked sausage and offers a piece with easy generosity. While eating, he studies the harbour stretching before you. Every voyage is different, he says, even when the destination remains the same. You look toward the eastern horizon again. Constantinople feels distant, almost hidden behind layers of sea and coastline you have yet to experience. Yet the route itself has already begun taking shape within your thoughts. Each conversation adds another thread. Each practical task reveals another piece of the larger journey. The afternoon passes beneath clear skies. Inventory continues patiently as crates receive final markings identifying their owners and destinations. Wax seals are pressed carefully onto important documents. Small leather purses containing silver coins are counted discreetly before being secured beneath layers of clothing, rather than packed with ordinary cargo. Travelers know that money, letters of credit, and personal documents remain safest when kept close throughout the voyage. You accompany Alvise into a quiet warehouse where several valuable items await loading. Among them rest folded lengths of fine Venetian wool, polished mirrors backed with carefully prepared metal, delicate coloured glass, coral jewellery gathered through Mediterranean trade, and small quantities of worked silver. These goods represent only part of the exchange. In Constantinople, they may be traded for silk, spices arriving from farther east, fine cotton textiles, wax, leather, or other valuable products that will eventually begin the long return journey westward. Standing inside the cool warehouse, surrounded by carefully arranged goods, you sense how deeply connected distant regions have become through peaceful exchange. A piece of cloth woven in northern Italy may eventually pass through Greek hands before reaching merchants from Anatolia or beyond. Pepper, harvested thousands of miles away, may one day season meals in European households. Countless journeys overlap within every object. Outside, the afternoon breeze strengthens slightly, carrying the fresh scent of salt across the harbour. Sailors begin covering portions of the cargo already secured aboard the ship. Loose items disappear below deck. Lanterns are inspected for the evenings ahead. Fresh bundles of firewood, carefully kept dry, are loaded for cooking when conditions permit. Nothing appears dramatic. Yet, with every completed task, the vessel becomes less a stationary object and more a home, prepared for weeks upon open water. As daylight slowly softens, the harbour grows quieter once again. Families arrive briefly to exchange farewells with loved ones preparing to leave. These partings remain calm, shaped by familiarity rather than sorrow. Voyages between Venice and the eastern Mediterranean have become part of life for many households. They bring absence, certainly, but also livelihood, opportunity, and the steady rhythm upon which the Republic has long depended. Evening settles gently across the lagoon. The last rays of sunlight turn the water to warm shades of gold before fading into deeper blues. Lanterns appear one by one along the quays, their reflections stretching across the quiet canals. Alvise secures the final clasp upon his travel chest before placing one hand lightly against its lid, as though acknowledging that everything necessary now rests inside. There is little left to arrange. Clothing has been folded, food has been stored, water waits in sealed containers, cargo has found its place, documents have been completed. The ship rests patiently beside the quay, rising and falling almost imperceptibly with the gentle movement of the tide. You remain for a while, listening to the soft creak of timber, the distant ringing of evening bells, and the quiet murmur of water against the hull. Venice feels peaceful behind you, secure in its familiar rhythms. Ahead lies the open Adriatic, waiting with calm certainty for the first unfurled sail. Before dawn fully reaches the rooftops, the harbour already carries a quiet sense of purpose. The darkness has softened into shades of blue, and the stars above the lagoon fade one by one as the eastern horizon slowly brightens. A cool breeze moves gently across the water, carrying the familiar scent of salt mixed with damp timber and tar. The city remains peaceful, yet there is a subtle feeling that this morning belongs not only to Venice, but also to the long road hidden beyond the sea. You arrive at the quay while lanterns still glow beside the waiting ship. Their warm light reflects in slow ripples against the hull, stretching and folding with every small movement of the tide. Sailors speak in low voices as they complete the final tasks that always seem to appear before departure. A coil of rope is secured once more. A barrel is shifted only a few inches to improve the balance of the cargo. Fresh water jars receive one last inspection before being carried below deck. Nothing feels rushed. Long experience has taught everyone that calm preparation serves a voyage far better than hurried confidence. Alvise greets the captain with a quiet nod. No lengthy discussion is needed. They have sailed together before, and much has already been decided during previous days. Their trust rests upon years of successful crossings, rather than many spoken words. The captain studies the sky for a few moments before turning toward the open lagoon. The morning breeze is steady enough to promise a comfortable beginning. Nearby, a young apprentice carefully wraps several parchment documents inside an oilcloth covering. Moisture can damage records as easily as rough handling, and these pages contain agreements, inventories, and letters intended for merchants waiting in distant ports. They may not seem as valuable as silk or silver, yet the entire voyage depends upon them. A written promise, carried safely across the sea, can open warehouse doors hundreds of miles away. The first rays of sunlight reach the upper windows of the buildings surrounding the harbour. Their pale golden light slowly descends until it touches the quiet water below. Venice begins to glow softly. Church towers stand clearly against the brightening sky, while the domes of St. Mark's Basilica catch the morning light with gentle brilliance. For a moment, everything seems perfectly still, as though the city itself pauses to watch another vessel prepare to leave. The gangplank is raised with practiced ease. Heavy mooring lines are loosened one at a time. Sailors work together almost silently, each movement flowing naturally into the next. Thick ropes slide across smooth wooden posts before being gathered neatly onto the deck. A final glance passes between the captain and the men handling the lines. Then, without ceremony, the ship begins to drift away from the quay. The movement is almost impossible to notice at first. Only the widening ribbon of water between the vessel and the stone waterfront reveals that the journey has truly begun. The city slowly starts to recede, not because it is moving away from you, but because you are quietly leaving it behind. You remain near the stern as Venice unfolds before your eyes from a new perspective. Narrow canals open into wider waterways. Familiar bridges appear smaller than they had seemed while walking across them only yesterday. Boats carrying vegetables, fish, and morning supplies continue their ordinary routines, barely pausing to notice another merchant vessel joining the day's traffic. Departure is part of daily life here. The ship glides through the broad lagoon with remarkable steadiness. Low islands emerge from the morning mist, some crowned with small churches whose bell towers have guided sailors for generations. Others contain little more than marsh grasses where birds search quietly among the shallow waters. Wooden navigation markers rise from the lagoon, showing the safest channels through shifting sandbanks known well to local pilots. A pilot boat approaches briefly. The experienced lagoon pilot aboard knows every hidden shoal and changing current surrounding Venice. Until the open sea is reached, his knowledge is as valuable as any chart. He stands near the bow with calm attention, giving only the smallest instructions to adjust the vessel's course. No dramatic commands echo across the deck. Gentle gestures and quiet words prove entirely sufficient. As the city gradually becomes more distant, you notice how its towers continue rising above the shimmering water long after individual buildings begin to disappear. Venice seems almost to float upon the horizon, its outlines softened by the morning haze. It has welcomed merchants from across the known world for centuries, yet every traveller eventually watches those familiar towers fade behind them before turning toward another coast. The lagoon widens further until the open Adriatic begins to reveal itself beyond the protective barrier of islands. The water changes subtly. Gentle ripples become longer, rolling swells that lift the ship with slow, reassuring rhythm. The captain gives a quiet order, and sailors begin unfurling the great sail. Canvas rises steadily up the mast. At first it hangs loosely, stirring only slightly in the breeze. Then the wind catches it. The cloth fills gradually, becoming smooth and firm. The ship answers almost immediately, gathering gentle forward motion without any sudden lurch. The sound is surprisingly soft. A quiet flutter, followed by the steady whisper of wind flowing through tightly stretched canvas. The lagoon now lies behind you. Ahead stretches the Adriatic Sea. Its surface appears endless beneath the growing daylight, though experienced eyes know it well. This sea has connected the Italian peninsula with the eastern shores for countless generations. Roman merchants, Byzantine officials, pilgrims, fishermen, diplomats, craftsmen, and sailors have all crossed these same waters. Their ships differed in design across the centuries, yet the rhythm of departure has remained remarkably familiar. Alvise joins you along the rail, resting both hands upon the polished wood. "The sea," he says, after a comfortable silence, "never truly belongs to anyone. We simply borrow a little space upon it." His words drift away with the breeze. The coastline of Italy slowly curves southward behind the ship, while the eastern horizon remains wide and open. The morning sun climbs higher, scattering bright reflections across the water that shimmer like countless pieces of polished glass. Gulls circle briefly, before returning toward the lagoon, leaving the vessel to continue alone across open water. Life aboard settles into its own peaceful routine surprisingly quickly. One sailor adjusts the angle of the sail as the wind changes slightly. Another checks the lashings, securing several cargo chests below a protective covering. The cook arranges simple clay pots within a small sheltered cooking space near the stern, preparing for the midday meal once the sea becomes even calmer. You begin noticing the quiet order that governs every hour aboard the vessel. Buckets are returned to their proper places after use. Loose rope is always coiled neatly rather than left beneath careless feet. Wooden hatches remain secured except when needed. Every habit contributes to safety, yet none feels burdensome. These routines have become second nature through years spent crossing familiar waters. By late morning, the breeze remains steady. The ship moves comfortably, neither hurried nor slow. The gentle rise and fall of the sea soon becomes almost hypnotic. Standing near the rail, you watch the changing colours beneath the surface. Close to the ship, the water glows green where sunlight reaches deeper layers. Farther away, it becomes rich blue, stretching toward the horizon until sea and sky almost merge into one. Several sailors gather briefly to mend a section of fishing net carried aboard. Fresh fish can provide welcome variety during longer crossings whenever conditions allow. Their fingers move with quiet skill, knotting each strand almost without looking. Conversation drifts easily between memories of previous voyages, familiar harbours, and changing weather. They speak less about remarkable events than about ordinary places remembered with quiet affection. A sheltered bay, a welcoming inn near a distant dock, a spring known for especially sweet water. Alvise opens one of his smaller travel bags and removes a carefully wrapped wooden cup. Filling it with watered wine, he offers you a share before pouring one for himself. Travel teaches us to appreciate simple things, he says. Fresh bread, dry clothing, a fair wind. You find yourself agreeing without needing words. As noon approaches, the cook prepares a modest meal. Thick slices of coarse bread accompany dried fish softened with olive oil. Small onions, olives, and hard cheese complete the meal. Nothing is elaborate, yet everything is satisfying after the cool morning upon the open sea. The crew gathers in small groups, eating without haste, while always leaving enough hands available to tend the ship. Above, the sail continues its patient work. Far below, unseen currents move through the Adriatic exactly as they have for thousands of years. During the quiet afternoon, the captain studies a simple magnetic compass resting carefully within a wooden box. Though experienced sailors rely heavily upon coastlines, stars, winds, and accumulated knowledge, the compass has become an increasingly valuable companion for navigation across open water. Beside it lies a rolled chart showing familiar ports, islands, and coastal landmarks. These maps remain practical rather than decorative, carrying the marks of frequent use instead of careful preservation. The sea itself offers endless variety despite its apparent simplicity. Small waves overlap one another in constantly changing patterns. Here and there, patches of darker water reveal subtle differences in wind or current. Seabirds occasionally appear from nowhere, gliding silently before disappearing again toward distant shores still invisible beyond the horizon. Later in the afternoon, a pod of dolphins surfaces beside the ship. They appear without warning, rising gracefully through the clear water before slipping beneath the surface once more. For several peaceful minutes they accompany the vessel, matching its pace with effortless ease. Sailors smile quietly at the familiar sight, but continue their work. Such encounters are welcomed as pleasant companions rather than remarkable spectacles. Eventually, the dolphins turn away, leaving only widening circles upon the calm sea. The afternoon light gradually softens, the wind cools slightly. Far ahead, the faint outline of land finally begins to emerge upon the eastern horizon. At first, it seems little more than a thin grey line separating sea from sky. Slowly, it grows clearer, revealing the distant mountains of the Dalmatian coast. No one celebrates the sight. There is no need. The crew simply acknowledges it with calm satisfaction before continuing their ordinary tasks. The first stage of the crossing has unfolded exactly as hoped. As evening approaches, the colours surrounding the ship become warmer. The mountains deepen into shades of blue and violet, while the western sky glows softly, behind the distant silhouette of Venice, now far beyond sight. The sea reflects copper and gold beneath the lowering sun. Alvius remains beside the rail for a long while, watching the approaching coastline with thoughtful eyes. Soon there will be sheltered harbours, stone villages climbing rocky hillsides, olive groves, vineyards, and roads that have welcomed travellers for centuries. But tonight, the sea itself remains your quiet home. The sail breathes gently above. The hull answers every slow swell with steady confidence. The journey east has truly begun. Night settles over the Adriatic without haste. The last warmth of the sun lingers for a while upon the western horizon before fading into deep shades of blue, and the sea gradually becomes a broad, quiet mirror reflecting the first stars. The ship moves with the same patient rhythm it has kept throughout the day, rising and falling so gently that after a time the motion begins to feel almost like breathing. You lean against the smooth wooden rail, noticing how the sounds of daylight have changed. The occasional call of a seabird has disappeared. In its place come the soft creak of timber, the steady whisper of wind filling the sail, and the quiet splash of water gliding past the hull. A lantern hangs beneath a small shelter near the stern, its flame protected from the breeze by polished horn panels. Its light reaches only a short distance across the deck, leaving the rest of the ship wrapped in comfortable darkness. Sailors move carefully without needing much illumination. They know every plank beneath their feet, every coil of rope, every hatch and beam. Years upon the sea have taught them to trust memory as much as sight. The captain remains awake beside the helm. He studies the stars as often as he watches the water ahead. Long before precise instruments became common aboard merchant vessels, generations of sailors learned to read the night sky with remarkable confidence. Polaris, the North Star, holds its quiet place above the horizon, offering reassurance even when distant coastlines disappear into darkness. Around it, familiar constellations continue their slow journey across the heavens, just as they guided Phoenician traders, Greek sailors, Roman captains, and Byzantine merchants centuries before this voyage. Alvise joins the watch for a little while, wrapping his wool cloak more closely around his shoulders as the night air cools. He says very little. There is no need to fill the silence with conversation. Instead, you stand together watching the stars, reflected upon the calm sea, where it becomes difficult to tell where the sky ends and the water begins. After several peaceful moments, he speaks quietly. My father once told me that every merchant should spend at least one night simply watching the sea. He smiles gently. Not to calculate profits, not to think about cargo, only to remember how small we are beside it. The thought settles comfortably into the silence. It does not feel solemn, only quietly true. As the hours pass, different sailors take their turns keeping watch, while others rest beneath simple blankets spread across sheltered parts of the deck. The voyage depends upon the steady routine, rather than long periods of exhausting work. Everyone understands that tomorrow will require the same careful attention as today. Strength is preserved through balance, not through constant effort. You find a comfortable place near several securely fastened cargo chests. Their solid presence reminds you that beneath the peaceful surface of this voyage lies the purpose that has drawn countless ships across these waters. Inside the hold, rest woven cloth from northern Italy, delicate Venetian glass, worked metal, coral ornaments, and carefully recorded agreements. In return, the eastern ports will offer goods that have travelled even farther. Pepper from India, cinnamon from Ceylon, silk from workshops that preserve traditions reaching back through Byzantium and beyond, beeswax from forests north of the Black Sea, and fine leather shaped by craftsmen whose families have practiced their trade for generations. Every object carries with it the quiet memory of many hands. Sleep comes easily aboard the gently moving vessel. When you awaken before sunrise, the stars have almost disappeared. A pale silver light stretches across the eastern sky, revealing the dark outline of mountains much closer than they had seemed the previous evening. The Dalmatian coast has emerged from the night with calm certainty. The morning breeze carries a different scent now. Alongside the familiar freshness of the sea comes the faint fragrance of pine forests warmed by the first light of day. Though the land still lies some distance away, its presence can already be felt through the changing air. The crew wakes gradually. Blankets are folded neatly before being stored below. A sailor draws fresh water into a wooden bucket so faces and hands can be washed. Another checks the rigging, running practiced fingers along knots tightened during the night. The cook rekindles a small charcoal fire within its protected hearth, placing a blackened pot above the glowing embers. Breakfast remains simple. Thick slices of yesterday's bread are softened with olive oil. A little goat's cheese, dried figs, and watered wine complete the meal. Alviso carefully cuts an apple into several pieces, sharing it among those nearby. Fresh fruit cannot be expected to last throughout a long voyage, so what remains is appreciated while it is still crisp. No one rushes through the meal. The sea remains calm, the wind favourable, and the day's work has already begun, almost without anyone noticing. As the sun climbs higher, the coastline reveals greater detail. Steep limestone cliffs descend toward narrow strips of shoreline, where small fishing boats rest upon pebbled beaches. Beyond them, clusters of stone houses gather around tiny harbours protected by natural coves. Olive trees cover many of the lower hills, their silvery leaves shimmering softly beneath the morning light. Higher slopes support dark green forests whose scent occasionally reaches the ship whenever the breeze turns toward the sea. The captain adjusts course slightly, keeping the vessel comfortably offshore, while remaining close enough to navigate using familiar landmarks. Merchant captains of this period often preferred to follow coastlines whenever practical. Doing so reduced uncertainty, offered opportunities to seek shelter if weather changed unexpectedly, and allowed fresh supplies to be obtained when needed. You notice that the mountains themselves become valuable companions during navigation. Their shapes remain visible from great distances, each ridge and valley known well to experienced sailors who have crossed these waters many times. A broad peak resembles the folded wing of a bird. Another rises sharply above neighbouring hills, making it easy to recognize even from far offshore. Nature provides its own map for those willing to observe patiently. During the late morning, a small fishing vessel approaches from the coast. It carries only 2 men, both weathered by years beneath sun and sea. They raise a hand in greeting as they pass. One holds up a freshly caught fish with an amused smile before continuing toward the nearest village. The exchange lasts only a few moments. No words are needed. The sea creates its own quiet fellowship among those who depend upon it. By midday, the ship enters calmer water, sheltered partly by a chain of rocky islands stretching along the Dalmatian coast. The waves become smaller, their gentle rhythm changing almost imperceptibly. Here, the water appears astonishingly clear. Looking over the side, you can see long strands of seaweed swaying beneath the surface, while small fish move between patches of pale stone far below. Alvise points toward one of the larger islands. Many travelers hurry past places like these. He watches the wooded shoreline drift by. But every island has welcomed sailors for longer than any of us can remember. Indeed, these islands have served as resting places since antiquity. Greek colonists established settlements along parts of this coast centuries before the Roman Empire expanded across the region. Roman roads later connected inland communities to these harbours, and Byzantine influence would continue shaping many coastal towns, long after imperial borders shifted elsewhere. The sea binds together histories that on land often appear separate. In the early afternoon, the captain announces that the ship will briefly enter a sheltered harbour before continuing southward the following day. Fresh water can be taken aboard, small repairs completed if necessary, and news exchanged with other merchants travelling in either direction. Such stops are ordinary parts of long-distance travel. Progress depends not upon uninterrupted movement, but upon thoughtful pauses made at the proper time. The harbour gradually comes into view between two rocky headlands. A small stone settlement climbs the hillside above it, its houses built closely together with pale limestone walls and red-tiled roofs. Near the waterfront stands a modest church whose bell tower overlooks both the village and the quiet bay. Fishing boats rest beside larger merchant vessels from several different ports, their masts rising peacefully against the afternoon sky. As the ship glides toward the quay, activity remains calm. Local fishermen mend nets beneath shaded awnings. Children carry baskets toward nearby homes, while occasionally pausing to watch the arriving vessel. Women rinse clothing in fresh water drawn from a communal well. A donkey patiently waits beside several sacks of grain, flicking its tail against persistent flies. Mooring lines are secured with practiced ease. The voyage pauses almost as gently as it began. Stepping ashore, you immediately notice the firmness of stone beneath your feet after 2 days upon the gently moving sea. The narrow streets rise steadily from the harbour, winding between houses built to withstand both winter winds and summer heat. Wooden shutters stand open to welcome the afternoon breeze. Pots of herbs grow beside doorways where rosemary, sage, and thyme release their fragrance whenever someone passes. Alvise walks without hurry toward a small inn overlooking the harbour. He greets its keeper by name, suggesting that this has been a familiar stopping place for many years. Hospitality along important trade routes often grows through repeated visits rather than chance encounters. A traveller remembered for honesty and courtesy finds doors opening more easily with every return. Inside the shaded courtyard, cool water flows quietly from a carved stone fountain fed by a spring higher in the hills. Sailors refill empty barrels, while others wash salt from their hands and faces. Nearby, a cooper examines one of the ship's casks, replacing a slightly loosened hoop before it can become troublesome during the next stage of the voyage. The afternoon passes peacefully. Fresh bread emerges from a village oven. Olive oil pressed from nearby groves is served with herbs gathered from the surrounding hillsides. A simple stew of beans, onions, and smoked meat simmers slowly over a fire, filling the courtyard with a comforting aroma. The meal is shared among travellers from Venice, Ragusa, and several coastal communities, each conversation drifting easily between weather, sailing conditions, family news, and reports from ports farther south. No one speaks of distant Constantinople as though it were an unreachable dream. Instead, it feels like another familiar harbour waiting patiently along the road ahead. As evening approaches once more, the village grows quieter. Fishing boats return before sunset. Bells from the small church drift softly across the bay. The sea reflects the warm colours of the fading sky, while the surrounding hills gradually deepen into blue shadows. The ship rests securely beside the stone quay, gently rising with the evening tide. Tomorrow the journey will continue farther along the eastern coast of the Adriatic, carrying you steadily toward the narrow seas that eventually lead to the great city, where Europe and Asia meet. For now, the peaceful harbour offers exactly what every traveller values most: fresh water, steady ground beneath your feet, simple food, familiar kindness, and a quiet night's rest before another unhurried day upon the ancient sea. The village wakes slowly beneath a sky washed with the pale colours that arrive just before sunrise. The harbour remains wrapped in gentle silence, disturbed only by the quiet tapping of small waves against the stone quay. Fishing boats, which returned the previous evening with their modest catches, now rest motionless beside the larger merchant vessels. Their nets hang neatly from wooden poles, drying in the cool morning air, while gulls wait patiently upon the harbour wall, watching the fishermen who will soon begin another familiar day. You leave the ship before the sun has climbed above the hills, following a narrow lane that winds upward between houses built from the pale limestone found throughout this coast. Their thick walls hold the coolness of the night, and wooden shutters stand partly open to welcome the fresh breeze drifting inland from the sea. Pots of rosemary, lavender, and sage rest upon window ledges, filling the air with quiet fragrance whenever the wind stirs their leaves. Alvisa's vessel lies peacefully below, its mast reflected in water so still that the image seems almost as solid as the ship itself. Beyond the harbour, the Adriatic reaches towards the western horizon, where Italy can no longer be seen. Only the sea remains between this coast and the city of Venice, now several peaceful days behind you. Alvise joins you after a few moments, carrying 2 small cups filled with warm barley drink sweetened lightly with honey. "It is good," he says, while looking over the harbour, "to remember where you have come from before thinking about where you are going." You stand together without speaking further. Around you, the village gradually awakens. A shepherd opens a wooden gate, allowing several goats to wander toward the rocky hillsides, where they will spend the day grazing among herbs and hardy grasses. Their small bells create a soft, irregular music that drifts gently through the morning air. Somewhere below, a baker removes the first loaves from a stone oven, and their warm scent reaches even this quiet place above the harbour. The settlement itself is modest, yet it occupies an important place within the rhythm of Mediterranean travel. Long before Venice became a maritime republic, these sheltered coves offered protection to sailors crossing the Adriatic. Greek colonists established communities along much of this coast, recognizing the value of safe anchorages among the countless islands. Later, Roman engineers improved roads leading inland, connecting coastal harbours with distant valleys where grain, timber, and livestock could be gathered. Centuries passed, empires rose and faded, but the sea continued bringing travellers to the same natural harbours. Returning toward the waterfront, you notice villagers beginning the ordinary work that quietly supports every journey. A cooper rolls newly repaired barrels toward the quay. A young boy carries baskets of onions and garlic from a nearby garden. An elderly woman hangs strips of salted fish beneath a shaded awning, where the morning breeze will help preserve them a little longer. None of these people expect to travel to Constantinople themselves, yet their work becomes part of every voyage that pauses here. The sailors have already begun preparing the ship once more. Fresh water, collected from the hillside spring, is carefully poured into clean barrels before each lid is sealed tightly with wooden pegs. Water is never taken for granted. A small leak unnoticed today may become a serious concern many days from now. One sailor gently taps each barrel with the handle of a mallet, listening for the clear sound that tells him everything has been secured properly. Nearby, the captain speaks quietly with a local fisherman whose weathered face suggests many decades spent upon these waters. Their conversation concerns neither politics nor distant markets. Instead, they discuss the wind that has settled over the southern Adriatic during recent days. The fisherman points toward the open sea, while tracing an invisible path through the air with one rough hand. The breeze should remain kind until tomorrow evening, he says. The captain thanks him with genuine appreciation. Such knowledge, gathered through daily observation rather than written records, often proves just as valuable as any chart carried aboard the ship. Before departure, several crew members walk through the village marketplace. It occupies only a small square beside the harbour, yet it reflects the quiet abundance of the surrounding countryside. Wooden tables display olives cured in earthen jars, soft cheeses wrapped in cloth, dried herbs tied into neat bundles, and woven baskets filled with figs, grapes, and late-season apples. Honey rests inside glazed ceramic pots sealed with beeswax. Nearby, a blacksmith sharpens simple tools, while exchanging greetings with farmers arriving from inland paths. You notice that coins change hands less frequently than you might expect. Many exchanges occur through long-standing relationships built over repeated visits. Alvise offers finely woven cloth in return for several jars of olive oil. Another sailor trades a small iron knife for smoked meat prepared by a local family. Trust has become its own quiet form of currency. Alvis pauses before an elderly basket maker whose hands continue weaving willow branches with calm precision despite his advancing years. Without needing many words, they greet one another like old acquaintances. "I see your journeys still bring you here," the basket maker says with a gentle smile. "And I see your hands have forgotten nothing," Alvis replies. The older man laughs softly before presenting a newly woven basket, sturdy enough to protect delicate goods during travel. Alvis examines the craftsmanship carefully before purchasing it without bargaining. Some things, you realize, have already found their proper value long before any price is spoken. As the morning advances, the harbour becomes quietly active once again. Sailors carry fresh provisions aboard, baskets of bread, onions, dried herbs, smoked fish, and several clay jars filled with olive oil. Firewood gathered from nearby forests is stacked neatly beneath protective coverings, where it will remain dry until needed. Even the smallest supplies receive thoughtful attention. Long-distance travel rewards those who prepare for ordinary days rather than extraordinary ones. Soon, the captain gives the familiar signal to make ready. The village gathers almost without noticing. Fishermen pause beside their boats. Children stand upon the harbour wall, waving toward the departing vessel. Several women shade their eyes while watching the crew cast off the mooring lines. There are no dramatic farewells. Ships arrive and depart throughout the year, becoming woven into the steady rhythm of coastal life. The vessel eases away from the quay. Once again, the widening strip of water quietly marks another stage of the journey. The harbour slips behind as the ship turns southward, following the remarkable chain of islands that protects much of the Dalmatian coast from the full force of the open Adriatic. These islands seem almost endless. Some rise only a few meters above the sea, covered with low shrubs shaped by wind and salt. Others support forests of pine and oak, while larger islands contain villages, vineyards, olive groves, and stone churches whose bell towers overlook quiet coves. The sea remains calm throughout the morning. Sunlight dances across its surface in shifting patterns that change with every passing cloud. Flying fish occasionally break through the water before disappearing again, almost instantly. A cormorant dries its wings upon a lonely rock where waves have polished the stone smooth over countless generations. The captain keeps the ship close enough to the islands that familiar landmarks remain visible, yet far enough offshore to avoid hidden reefs. Navigation here demands patience rather than speed. The coastline twists gently, revealing new inlets and sheltered bays throughout the day. Alvis unrolls a weathered chart across a small table on deck. Its parchment bears the marks of many voyages. Tiny notes written in faded ink identify reliable anchorages, freshwater springs, and harbours where trustworthy merchants may be found. He traces the route ahead with one finger. "Our road is written upon the sea," he says quietly, but every captain carries it a little differently. Looking at the chart, you understand his meaning. There is no single path from Venice to Constantinople. Wind, weather, season, politics, and the needs of cargo all influence the choices made along the way. Experience teaches flexibility more than rigid certainty. By midday, the ship passes another coastal settlement nestled beneath steep hills. Terraced fields climb the slopes behind it, where vines and olive trees grow among carefully arranged stone walls. Small patches of grain shimmer golden in the sunlight, while goats move confidently across rocky ground that appears almost impossible to cross. Several local boats sail nearby, their crews occupied with fishing rather than trade. One captain raises a hand in greeting. Another points toward a group of dolphins, visible farther ahead. The animals surface gracefully beside the ship once more, swimming effortlessly through the clear water before turning toward deeper sea. No one aboard interrupts their work to admire them for long. The sea offers such quiet gifts often enough that appreciation becomes calm rather than excited. The afternoon breeze strengthens slightly from the northwest, filling the sail more firmly. The vessel responds with smooth, steady motion. Below deck, the cargo remains secure. Above, the crew adjusts the rigging with practiced movements requiring few spoken instructions. You spend a part of the afternoon beside one of the younger sailors as he carefully repairs a section of canvas using heavy linen thread and a curved needle. Every stitch must remain strong enough to endure weeks of changing winds. "My father taught me this," he says while working. "And who taught him?" "My grandfather." A gentle smile appears as he looks ahead. "I expect the sea taught all three of us." His answer seems entirely fitting. Toward evening, the coastline changes again. The mountains draw closer to the water, their pale cliffs glowing warmly beneath the lowering sun. Narrow valleys open briefly between the hills, revealing distant forests and streams hidden from the sea. Here and there, small monasteries appear upon rocky headlands, built where solitude and the endless horizon encourage quiet reflection. The ship enters another broad channel between islands. The water becomes remarkably smooth, protected from the open sea by long ridges of land stretching parallel to the mainland. It feels almost like sailing upon a great inland lake. As sunset approaches, the cook prepares a comforting meal of bean stew flavored with onions, herbs, and a little smoked pork purchased that morning in the village. Fresh bread is warmed beside the small cooking fire until its crust becomes crisp once again. The aroma drifts gently across the deck, mixing with the scent of salt air and pine carried from nearby shores. The crew gathers quietly after the meal. Some mend clothing, others polish tools. One sailor carves a small wooden spoon, removing thin curls of pale wood with slow, careful strokes. Alvisi sits nearby, writing several notes upon a folded piece of parchment, recording purchases made during the stop and observations about weather and supplies. Such records will later become part of larger account books waiting in Venice, linking one peaceful day to many years of trade. As darkness slowly returns, lanterns are lit once again. Behind the ship, the islands fade into soft silhouettes beneath a sky already welcoming its first stars. Ahead, the Adriatic continue unfolding one quiet mile at a time, carrying you steadily toward the narrow waters that will eventually open the gates of the eastern Mediterranean. The lantern beside the helm burns with a calm, steady flame as the ship glides through the protected channel between the islands. Night has returned gently, wrapping the surrounding hills in deep blue shadows, while leaving the sea touched with silver wherever the moonlight reaches its surface. The breeze has softened since sunset, and the great sail no longer strains against the mast. Instead, it breathes quietly, filling and relaxing with each subtle change in the wind, its movements as slow and reassuring as the tide itself. You remain on deck for a while before sleep, watching the shoreline pass almost silently. Here and there, a single light appears upon the land, perhaps from a farmhouse or a monastery overlooking the water. Such lights are small against the darkness, yet they remind every traveller that these coasts have long been home to communities whose lives follow the rhythm of the seasons, rather than the schedules of distant markets. The sea itself seems to rest. Only the gentle murmur beneath the hull reveals that the voyage continues, even while much of the crew sleeps. A sailor keeping the night watch adjusts the tiller by no more than the width of a hand, following the captain's earlier instructions. The correction is so slight that you barely notice it, yet the vessel responds immediately, holding its steady course through the channel. Above, the sky opens with remarkable clarity. Without the bright lights of great cities, the stars appear almost countless. The broad band of the Milky Way stretches from one horizon to the other, familiar to generations of sailors who crossed these waters long before written charts became common aboard merchant ships. They did not see the heavens merely as something beautiful. They saw guidance, direction, and quiet reassurance. Alvise joins the watch for a short time, carrying nothing more than his folded cloak. "My grandfather," he says softly while looking upward, "claimed he could tell the seasons simply by how the stars rose over the sea." He smiles to himself. "I never learned quite so well, but I still enjoy looking." His words are followed by comfortable silence. Some knowledge can be passed from one generation to another through careful teaching. Other knowledge grows slowly through years of patient observation. The sea seems willing to teach both, provided no one tries to hurry the lesson. When sleep finally comes, it is accompanied by the gentle rhythm of the ship moving beneath you. The creaking timbers no longer sound unfamiliar. Instead, they have become part of the night's quiet music, joining the whisper of water and the occasional flutter of canvas overhead. By the time you awaken, dawn is already touching the eastern sky. The islands surrounding the channel emerge slowly from the fading darkness. Their rocky slopes, grey beneath the moon, now reveal shades of green where pine forests cling to the hillsides. The air feels fresh, carrying the resinous scent of the trees whenever the breeze crosses the land before reaching the ship. Morning aboard begins with familiar routines that now seem almost effortless. Blankets are folded and stored. The deck is swept free of the small traces left by yesterday's work. Buckets of seawater are drawn up so the planks can be rinsed before they dry beneath the strengthening sun. Every sailor performs these tasks without needing instruction. Cleanliness is more than habit aboard a ship. Salt left to gather where it should not can shorten the life of timber, rope, and iron alike. The cook prepares breakfast from the remaining bread purchased in the village. Though no longer fresh from the oven, it softens pleasantly when dipped into warm broth made from herbs gathered along the Dalmatian coast. Dried figs and a little goat's cheese complete the meal. Alvise breaks his portion carefully, setting aside a few pieces for later in the day. "Waste travels farther than wisdom," he remarks quietly, when one of the younger sailors nearly discards a small crust. The sailor smiles, retrieves it, and slips it into his pouch. As the sun rises fully, the channel widens, and the sea opens once again. The islands become more scattered now, separated by broader stretches of water. Some are little more than rocky outcrops where seabirds nest, undisturbed. Others support vineyards planted upon carefully built terraces that climb surprisingly steep hillsides. Stone walls divide the fields into narrow strips, each one patiently constructed by generations who learned to make use of every piece of fertile ground. The captain studies both the coastline and the wind before altering course slightly toward the southeast. The Adriatic itself is narrowing. Far ahead, though still beyond sight, lies the entrance to the Ionian Sea, where the waters broaden once more before leading toward Greece, and eventually the great gateway of the Bosporus. Alvise unrolls his chart again, though this time he studies it less for navigation than for memory. "My first voyage," he says, tracing a faded mark upon the parchment, "reached only this far." His finger rests near one of the larger islands. "I believed then that I had already seen half the world." He laughs gently. "Now I know the sea always leaves another horizon waiting." His reflection feels less like advice than simple gratitude. the morning passes peacefully. The wind remains steady, allowing the sail to hold its shape without frequent adjustment. Several sailors use the opportunity to inspect the ship more carefully. One examines the wooden pegs securing the rail. Another oils the iron fittings near the rudder. Two younger crew members descend into the hold, checking that cargo has not shifted during the previous night's gentle movement. You accompany them below. The hold is cooler than the deck above, carrying the mixed scents of timber, rope, beeswax, olive oil, and wool. Light enters through the open hatch in narrow shafts, illuminating rows of carefully stacked barrels and chests. Every item remains exactly where it was placed before departure from Venice. One sailor pauses beside a crate containing delicate glassware. "My brother makes these," he says. "He works in Murano." The sailor nods. "He says every piece begins as sand and fire. I suppose every voyage begins with small things too." His observation lingers pleasantly as you continue through the hold. Commerce is often measured in great quantities and distant markets, yet every object here began with individual hands shaping wood, weaving cloth, blowing molten glass, or sewing leather, one careful piece at a time. Returning to the deck, you notice the changing colour of the sea. The water has deepened into a richer blue than during the previous days, reflecting both greater depth and the clearer skies overhead. Occasionally, long shadows pass beneath the surface where schools of fish move together through the sunlight. Around midday, another merchant vessel appears upon the horizon. At first it seems no larger than a dark mark upon the water. Gradually its sail becomes visible. Then its hull. The captain recognizes its design almost immediately. "Ragusa," he says quietly. The ship approaches at an unhurried pace, following its own course northward toward Venice. As the distance between the two vessels narrows, sailors aboard each raise their hands in greeting. There is no attempt to draw alongside, no exchange of cargo, no lengthy conversation shouted across the waves. Only a few brief calls asking about the weather farther south and the condition of the sea ahead. Calm winds, clear passage, safe harbours. The answers travel easily across the water before the ships continue in opposite directions, each carrying news no larger than a few sentences, yet valuable enough to remember. The exchange feels quietly familiar, much like two neighbours today pausing for a brief word before each continues with the rest of the day. Alvise watches the other vessel disappear toward the northwest. "It is comforting," he says, "to know others are always upon the road." Indeed, the sea is never entirely empty. Though vast, it quietly connects lives that may never meet again after a single passing greeting. During the afternoon, the coastline becomes more rugged. Limestone cliffs descend directly into deep water, where waves polish the rock into smooth curves. Small caves appear near the waterline, carved slowly by centuries of wind and tide. Above them, hardy shrubs cling to narrow ledges where only the toughest plants can survive. A pair of eagles circles high above one of the cliffs. Far below, goats move confidently across paths that seem invisible from the ship. The captain points toward a distant headland, where an old watchtower stands overlooking the sea. Such towers have long helped coastal communities observe approaching ships, whether merchants bringing welcome trade or vessels whose intentions remained uncertain. Many have been rebuilt over the centuries, yet their purpose has changed little. From these quiet stone heights, generations have watched the same waters stretching endlessly toward the horizon. By late afternoon, the breeze freshens once more. Sailors adjust the rigging with calm efficiency. The sail fills more firmly, and the ship gathers a little additional speed without sacrificing its comfortable rhythm. The bow cuts smoothly through the water, leaving long ribbons of white foam that quickly fade back into blue. Alvise sits beneath the shade of the mast, carefully polishing a small brass weight used for measuring valuable goods. "You cannot bargain honestly," he says, while holding it to the light, "unless both people trust the measure." He returns it to its leather pouch. Trade begins long before the coins appear. Looking around the ship, you realize how often trust has quietly shaped every stage of the journey. Trust between captain and crew, between merchant and craftsman, between sailor and shipwright, between strangers meeting in distant harbours. Without that patient confidence, the great web of Mediterranean commerce could never have endured for centuries. As evening approaches, clouds gather lightly along the western horizon, turning shades of soft gold and pale rose beneath the lowering sun. The sea reflects their colours in broad ribbons that stretch almost to the ship itself. The cook prepares another simple meal, this time adding lentils to the pot along with onions, garlic, and fragrant herbs purchased in the coastal village. The warm scent drifts across the deck, blending with the cool freshness carried by the evening breeze. After supper, several sailors quietly sing an old working song while coiling heavy ropes for the night. Their voices remain gentle, never rising above the sound of the sea. The melody is simple, repeated slowly enough that even those unfamiliar with the words can follow its calm rhythm. Darkness returns once more. Ahead, the southern reaches of the Adriatic wait patiently. Beyond them lie new shores, different harbours, and the ancient waters that will gradually carry you toward Constantinople, one peaceful day at a time. The following morning arrives with a softer light than those before it. Thin clouds have drifted across the eastern sky during the night, turning the sunrise into a gentle wash of silver and pale gold rather than bright bands of colour. The sea reflects this quieter beginning, its surface smooth, except for the long ripples that spread away from the ship's bow. The breeze has become lighter, and the great sail hangs with a relaxed curve instead of the firm shape it held yesterday. No one aboard seems concerned. The Mediterranean has always asked travellers to accept its changing moods with patience rather than expectation. You step onto the deck while the crew is already beginning another familiar routine. One sailor wipes away the night's moisture from the railings with a coarse linen cloth. Another checks the lashings around the cargo hatch, making certain that the wooden cover remains tightly fastened. The captain stands near the bow for several moments without speaking, simply observing the movement of the water and the slow drift of the clouds overhead. His decisions are formed first through watching, only later through action. Breakfast is shared quietly. The bread has become firmer after several days at sea, yet no one complains. Small pieces are dipped into warm broth, prepared with onions and herbs, softening them once again. A handful of olives passes from one sailor to another, followed by dried grapes gathered from vineyards somewhere along the Adriatic coast. The meal is simple, but its familiarity brings comfort. Each morning begins almost the same, and within that repetition there is an unexpected peace. As the vessel continues southward, the islands gradually become fewer, The coastline no longer winds as closely beside you, but begins to pull away toward the east, revealing broader stretches of open water. Mountains still rise beyond the shore, their pale limestone faces catching the filtered morning light. Yet they now appear more distant, softened by a light haze that settles above the land. Alvise leans against the rail, watching the changing horizon. Every coast has its own way of saying farewell, he says. You look back toward the islands, now fading behind the ship. They seem almost suspended upon the water, their outlines becoming gentler with every passing mile. And every new coast, he continues, welcomes you long before you arrive. There is wisdom in the observation. Though Constantinople remains far ahead, the journey has already begun introducing you to the many worlds that lie between Venice and that great eastern city. Each harbour, each village, each island has quietly become part of the road. By mid-morning, the breeze weakens further. The sail flutters gently before settling once again. The captain orders only a small adjustment, turning the vessel slightly to make better use of what wind remains. No frustration appears among the crew. Waiting has always been part of sailing. A merchant who expects the sea to obey his schedule soon learns disappointment. The slower pace allows more attention to everyday tasks. Two sailors spread several lengths of rope across the deck to inspect them for wear. Thick hemp fibers, darkened by salt and years of use, are examined inch by inch. Whenever a section begins to fray, it is carefully repaired before weakness has a chance to spread. Nearby, another crew member sharpens a small knife upon a smooth whetstone, its rhythmic scraping becoming part of the morning's gentle sounds. You notice how every object aboard receives regular care. Wooden buckets are dried upside down after use. Iron hinges are lightly coated with oil. Leather straps are checked for cracks where salt might have stiffened them. These quiet acts of maintenance rarely appear in stories of great voyages. Yet without them, no ship could travel safely across the Mediterranean year after year. Near midday, the sea becomes almost perfectly calm. The sail hangs loosely now, barely stirred by the faintest breath of air. The ship continues forward, though more slowly than before, carried partly by the lingering swell beneath its hull. No one wastes the opportunity. The captain gives permission for several sailors to lower a fishing line over the side. It is a simple arrangement. Strong cord, a carefully shaped hook, and fresh bait prepared from yesterday's remaining fish. The line disappears beneath the clear water while everyone returns quietly to other work. Not long afterward, one sailor feels a gentle pull. There is no excitement, only patient concentration as he draws the line upward, hand over hand. Soon, a silver fish breaks the surface, flashing brightly in the midday light, before being lifted aboard. It is large enough to provide a welcome addition to the evening meal. Alvise smiles. The sea enjoys surprising those who wait. The fish is cleaned immediately at the stern, where seawater washes everything neatly overboard. Nothing is wasted. Even the bones will later flavor a simple broth. During the quiet afternoon, you sit beneath the shade cast by the sail, listening as Alvise speaks about the many goods that pass through Venice on their long journeys across continents. People often speak first of spices, he says, carefully folding a piece of parchment after reviewing several notes. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves. They travel astonishing distances before reaching our markets. He pauses, watching the sea. But there are quieter travellers as well. He begins naming them not as a list, but almost as memories. Fine beeswax from forests near the Black Sea, valued by monasteries and churches whose candles must burn steadily through long services. Cotton cloth woven in workshops far to the east, softer than many fabrics produced in Europe. Alum, essential for fixing dyes into wool so that colours remain bright after years of wear. Silk whose smooth surface reflects light differently with every movement, treasured not only for beauty, but also for the remarkable skill required to weave it. Each product carries more than value. It carries knowledge of climate, soil, craftsmanship, and generations of experience. And then, Alvise adds with a quiet smile, there are stories. He taps the side of one cargo chest. Those travel without needing any room at all. Indeed they do. Every sailor aboard knows tales learned in distant harbours. Every merchant remembers customs observed in foreign markets. Every craftsman discovers techniques brought home by someone who watched another pair of hands at work hundreds of miles away. Trade carries ideas just as faithfully as it carries cargo. Clouds drift overhead during the afternoon, offering welcome shade from the summer sun. Their reflections move slowly across the sea, creating broad patches where the water changes from bright blue to deep grey before becoming blue once again. A pair of sea turtles surfaces briefly alongside the vessel. Only their rounded shells and curious heads appear above the water before they disappear beneath the surface once more. The younger sailors pause to watch them. One of the older crew members smiles. They have longer voyages than any of us. The remark draws quiet laughter before everyone returns to work. As the day continues, the breeze gradually returns. At first, it is barely noticeable, lifting only the smallest corner of the sail. Then, almost without warning, the canvas begins filling once more. The ship answers immediately, gathering steady movement as though waking gently from a restful pause. The captain nods with quiet satisfaction. No commands are shouted. Only a few practice adjustments are needed before the vessel settles into its familiar rhythm again. Late in the afternoon, the coastline ahead changes character. The mountains descend closer to the sea, creating long headlands separated by broad bays where the water appears almost motionless. On one distant ridge, you notice the broken outline of ancient stone walls. Alvise follows your gaze. Roman, he says, many generations before ours. Though the ruins are too far away for details to be seen clearly, they serve as a gentle reminder that these shores have welcomed travellers for far longer than the Republic of Venice has existed. Roman roads once carried merchants inland from these very harbours. Earlier still, Greek sailors sought shelter among these same bays. The road you follow is ancient, not because it was built once, but because countless people have chosen it again and again. Toward evening, the captain announces that they will remain at sea through the night, rather than entering another harbour. The weather is favourable, the wind reliable, and the distance to tomorrow's destination comfortably within reach. Preparations for the night begin quietly. Lanterns are inspected and lit. The evening meal is prepared from the fish caught earlier, gently simmered with onions, herbs, and a little olive oil. Fresh bread is sliced carefully so that enough remains for breakfast. The aroma spreads warmly across the deck. The crew gathers in small groups, sharing the meal while the coastline slowly darkens beneath the setting sun. Afterward, Alvise removes a small wooden box from his travel chest. Inside rests a compact balance scale with delicate brass pans folded neatly together. You watch as he assembles it with practiced hands. He places a tiny silver weight upon one side, then another. Satisfied that everything remains perfectly true, despite several days at sea, he folds the instrument once again. Accuracy, he says, returning it to its box, is easier to keep than to recover. The observation applies to much more than measuring goods. As darkness settles over the Adriatic once more, the clouds clear entirely. Stars return in quiet abundance. The ship continues southward beneath them, leaving only a gentle wake that slowly disappears into the endless water behind. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the narrow entrance to the Ionian Sea waits patiently. Beyond that lie the coasts of Greece. Beyond Greece, the Aegean. And beyond the Aegean, the ancient walls of Constantinople still resting unseen beneath the same stars that now shine peacefully above your journey. The night passes with remarkable gentleness. The wind remains steady enough to carry the ship onward without demanding constant attention, and the sea, though never perfectly still, rises and falls with a slow rhythm that soon feels as familiar as breathing. You awaken once before dawn to the sound of footsteps crossing the deck above. A sailor quietly relieves another who has kept the middle watch, and their brief exchange consists of little more than a nod and a few softly spoken words about the wind. The lantern near the helm burns lower now, its flame small but unwavering against the darkness. When morning finally begins to brighten the eastern horizon, the stars withdraw one by one until only the brightest remain. The first light reveals a sea that seems almost endless. During the night, the coastline has slipped farther away, leaving only the faintest outline of distant mountains resting beneath a pale sky. The ship has entered broader waters, where land no longer guides every moment of the voyage. Here the captain depends more heavily upon the wind, the stars remembered from the night before, the position of the rising sun, and the quiet confidence earned through many crossings. The crew greets the new day without ceremony. Blankets are folded, ropes inspected, and the deck washed with buckets of seawater drawn steadily over the side. The scent of salt rises fresh into the cool morning air. A young sailor pauses for a moment to scrub away a stubborn patch of dried tar, before smiling with satisfaction at the clean planks beneath it. Even such small accomplishments seem to belong naturally within the rhythm of life aboard. Breakfast is prepared while the sun climbs slowly above the horizon. Warm porridge made from coarse grain simmers in an iron pot, enriched with a little honey purchased in the coastal village several days earlier. The sweetness is modest, yet enough to brighten the meal. Each sailor receives a wooden bowl, along with a small piece of cheese and yesterday's bread. Alvise thanks the cook quietly before taking his place near the rail, where he eats while watching the changing colours of the sea. The water has become deeper in hue than during the previous days. It stretches away in broad shades of blue that shift with every passing cloud, while long swells roll beneath the ship from far beyond the visible horizon. These are not the short waves shaped by nearby shores, but the larger movements of open water, carrying the memory of distant winds that have travelled across the Mediterranean. By mid-morning, a small group of seabirds appears overhead. They circle briefly before gliding away toward the southeast. The captain watches them with interest. They know land better than we do, he remarks. Indeed, experienced sailors often paid close attention to birds. Their direction, numbers, and behavior could quietly suggest the nearness of islands or changing weather. Nature offers many signs to those willing to notice them without impatience. Alvise joins you near the bow, carrying a folded length of fine Venetian wool that he's removed from one of the cargo chests for inspection. He unfolds it carefully, allowing the morning light to reveal its deep blue colour. "This will never remain here," he says. He smiles gently. "It already belongs somewhere else." He explains that cloth such as this may eventually pass through several hands before reaching its final owner. A merchant in Constantinople might exchange it for silk. That silk may then travel north through the Black Sea, or east toward Persia. Another trader may purchase only part of the original bolt, dividing it again before selling smaller pieces to tailors whose customers will never know how many roads the fabric has crossed. You run your fingers lightly across the woven surface. It feels soft, tightly made, and surprisingly warm despite the cool morning breeze. Alvise folds it once more. "Everything travels," he says, "sometimes farther than the people carrying it." As the hours pass, the sky clears completely. The wind freshens just enough to fill the sail with quiet confidence, and the ship resumes its steady pace. The captain studies the horizon carefully before pointing toward a faint shape almost impossible to distinguish from the haze. There. At first you see nothing. Then gradually the outline becomes clearer. A low stretch of land appears far ahead, rising gently from the sea. Alvise nods. The first of the southern islands. They are approaching the waters that gradually lead toward the entrance of the Ionian Sea. Though many days still remain before Constantinople, another stage of the journey is unfolding almost unnoticed. As the vessel draws nearer, the island reveals rocky shores, interrupted by small, sheltered coves, where the water glows clear turquoise above pale stone. Sparse shrubs cover much of the landscape, while clusters of pine trees gather wherever deeper soil has collected. No large settlement is immediately visible, only the occasional column of smoke rising gently into the still air. The captain chooses to keep well offshore, following a route long favoured by merchant vessels. There is no need to enter every harbour. Some places simply serve as landmarks, quietly confirming that the voyage continues according to expectation. The afternoon brings a welcome breeze from the northwest. Sailors climb the rigging with practiced ease, making small adjustments to the sail. Watching them work, you notice how naturally they move across the ship. Hands find familiar ropes without searching. Feet rest confidently upon narrow beams high above the deck. Years of experience have turned difficult movements into ordinary habits. One sailor, older than many of the others, descends carefully before settling beside a coil of rope. "I was 14 on my first voyage," he says, after noticing your interest. "Were you frightened?" He considers the question for a moment. "Only? Until I became busy." He laughs softly. There is always work aboard a ship. It leaves little room for fear. His answer seems to describe much of historical travel itself. Ordinary responsibilities often leave little space for dramatic emotions. Meals must be prepared, equipment repaired, animals fed, cargo protected. Every day offers enough practical tasks to keep the journey moving quietly forward. Later, Alvise opens a small leather pouch containing several coins collected during previous voyages. He places them upon a folded cloth, one by one. A Venetian ducat catches the sunlight with its rich golden colour. Beside it rests a silver coin from one of the Dalmatian cities. Another bears Greek lettering worn smooth by years of use. No market expects only one currency, he explains. Merchants crossing the Mediterranean rarely depended upon a single type of coin. Gold, silver, letters of credit, trusted partnerships, and carefully recorded accounts all played their part. Trade demanded not only knowledge of goods, but also familiarity with the customs of many different regions. He carefully returns each coin to its pouch. "The most valuable thing I carry," he says, "cannot fit inside this bag." You wait. My reputation. Nothing more needs to be added. Throughout the Mediterranean, where journeys lasted weeks or months and agreements often depended upon trust established over many years, a merchant's good name could indeed become more valuable than any cargo aboard the ship. As afternoon begins to soften toward evening, another vessel appears upon the horizon. Unlike all Vice ship encountered several days earlier, this one is smaller, its hull built for speed rather than heavy cargo. The captain studies it calmly. A courier. The vessel passes at a respectful distance, carrying official messages between ports. Its crew raises a brief greeting before continuing south without slowing. Even news has its own road across the sea. The coastline gradually changes once more. Ahead, higher mountains begin emerging through the haze, their distant slopes appearing almost blue beneath the afternoon light. Alvise watches them quietly. "Those hills," he says, "have welcomed sailors since the days of Homer." Whether every story connected to those ancient shores remains exactly as remembered matters less than the remarkable continuity of the route itself. Long before medieval merchants crossed these waters, Bronze Age traders, Greek mariners, and Roman sailors followed many of the same coastlines. The ships changed, languages changed, kingdoms rose and disappeared. Yet the sea continued offering the same passages between east and west. As sunset approaches, the sky becomes filled with gentle colours reflected across the broad water. Gold fades into amber, then soft rose, before finally deepening toward violet. The cook prepares a modest evening meal from lentils flavoured with garlic and herbs, accompanied by slices of smoked fish remaining from earlier provisions. Warm bread, carefully rationed, is shared among the crew. After supper, conversation drifts naturally. One sailor remembers a harbour where swallows nested beneath every roof. Another speaks of a monastery whose bells could supposedly be heard across the water on calm mornings. Alvise recalls a bookseller in Constantinople who always insisted that manuscripts deserved better protection than spices. Each memory feels small. Together, they create a map, made not only of places, but of lived experience. Darkness returns gently. The lantern is lit once again beside the helm. Above, the stars begin appearing over the quiet Mediterranean. Ahead, the mountains grow slightly clearer with every passing hour, promising that tomorrow will bring another new shoreline, another peaceful harbour, and another quiet step along the ancient road leading ever closer to Constantinople. The mountains that appeared only as pale blue shapes during the previous evening now stand with quiet clarity beneath the first light of dawn. Their slopes descend gradually toward the sea, where narrow beaches and rocky coves alternate along a coastline that has welcomed sailors for thousands of years. The morning air carries a freshness different from the northern Adriatic. It is softer now, touched with the faint fragrance of wild herbs growing upon sunlit hillsides. Somewhere beyond those ridges, olive groves, orchards, and small farming villages are beginning their own day, though from the deck of the ship they remain hidden, behind folds of rising land. The captain has been awake long before sunrise. You find him studying both the coastline and the sea with equal attention, one hand resting lightly upon the polished rail near the helm. He has crossed these waters enough times to know that each new stretch of coast offers its own character. Winds that serve well along one shore may weaken around the next headland. Currents shift where deep channels meet shallower bays. Safe anchorages appear where the shape of the land shelters vessels from changing weather. Nothing about his observations seems hurried. He watches patiently before making even the smallest adjustment. The sail catches a slightly stronger breeze as the morning brightens. Canvas tightens with a familiar whisper, and the ship answers by moving a little more eagerly through the water. Several sailors smile almost without noticing it. Good wind is appreciated in much the same way as fresh bread or clean water, not as something extraordinary, but as one of life's quiet blessings. Breakfast is prepared while the vessel follows the coastline southward. Warm barley porridge is flavoured with a little dried fruit saved carefully from earlier provisions. Fresh water is poured sparingly into wooden cups, each sailor drinking with the awareness that every barrel must continue serving the voyage until another dependable spring is reached. Alvise eats slowly, pausing now and then to watch the hills unfolding beyond the sea. It is curious, he says after a while, how familiar a place becomes after enough visits. He nods toward the coastline. The first time I noticed every cliff. Now I remember the people waiting beyond them. His journeys have taught him that ports are remembered less for their stone walls than for the friendships built there over many years. A trusted innkeeper, a careful warehouse clerk, a family of shipwrights whose workmanship never disappoints. Such memories become landmarks as enduring as any mountain. The shoreline grows more detailed as the morning continues. White limestone cliffs catch the sunlight where they rise directly from the sea, while narrow valleys between them reveal clusters of cypress trees standing dark against the lighter hills. In a sheltered bay, several fishing boats drift quietly over calm water. Their sails are smaller than those carried by merchant vessels, shaped for local work rather than long crossings. One fisherman notices the passing ship and raises an arm in greeting. A sailor aboard your vessel answers with the same simple gesture. The exchange lasts only a heartbeat before both boats continue upon their separate paths. These brief acknowledgements form an unspoken language shared across the Mediterranean. A raised hand, a nod, a calm smile, small signs that recognize common work upon the sea. As the sun climbs higher, the captain points toward a narrow opening between two rocky headlands. We'll pass through there. The channel ahead has been used by generations of sailors seeking calmer water before continuing farther south. From a distance, it appears almost hidden, its entrance concealed by overlapping cliffs. Only when the ship draws nearer does the passage reveal itself. The water changes immediately upon entering. Outside, the sea had carried long rolling swells. Inside, it becomes remarkably smooth. The surrounding hills shelter the channel from much of the wind, allowing the surface to settle until every reflection becomes almost perfectly clear. You lean over the rail, Below, sunlight reaches the seabed, where patches of pale sand alternate with darker meadows of seagrass. Fish move lazily among submerged rocks, their silver scales flashing briefly before disappearing again into deeper water. Alvise notices your quiet attention. The sea always rewards those who look slowly. He has spoken many thoughtful observations during the journey, yet none have sounded rehearsed. They arise naturally from the place, the moment, and long familiarity with both. By late morning, the channel widens into a peaceful bay, where a modest harbour rests beneath the protection of surrounding hills. The settlement is larger than the previous village, yet far smaller than the bustling ports of Venice. Stone warehouses stand beside the quay. A handful of merchant ships ride quietly at anchor, while smaller coastal vessels move between nearby islands, carrying timber, wine, olive oil, and grain. The captain decides to enter. Fresh provisions remain sufficient, but news from other ports is often as valuable as supplies themselves. As the ship approaches the quay, dock workers prepare thick mooring ropes without unnecessary shouting. Their movements suggest long practice. One catches the first line cleanly before securing it around a worn stone bollard, polished smooth by countless ships over many generations. The vessel settles gently against the quay. Stepping ashore, you notice how the harbour differs from those farther north. The architecture reflects influences gathered from many centuries of exchange across the eastern Adriatic. Stone houses stand close together to provide shade during the hotter months. Wooden balconies overlook narrow lanes where vines climb between neighbouring buildings. Roof tiles glow warmly beneath the midday sun. The marketplace occupies an open square only a short walk from the waterfront. Its atmosphere is lively without ever becoming noisy. Farmers from nearby valleys have arrived with baskets of grapes, onions, beans, and fresh herbs. Fishermen display the morning's catch upon beds of damp seaweed. Potters arrange simple cooking vessels whose reddish clay contrasts beautifully with the pale limestone surrounding the square. Alvise walks with calm familiarity among the stalls. He pauses beside a spice cellar whose small wooden boxes release subtle fragrances into the warm air. Not the great quantities of pepper and cinnamon found in Venice, but local herbs gathered from surrounding hillsides: thyme, marjoram, bay leaves, wild oregano. Alvise purchases several bundles. The cook will appreciate these, he says with quiet satisfaction. Nearby, a woman sells honey collected from bees that feed among mountain flowers. The colour is lighter than the honey purchased farther north. She offers a small taste upon the end of a wooden spoon. Its flavour carries hints of herbs growing upon rocky slopes warmed by the Mediterranean sun. Alvise buys 2 sealed jars. Not everything aboard must be traded. Some comforts simply make the journey more pleasant. While walking through the market, you begin noticing how many languages drift through the air. Venetian merchants discuss cargo with local traders. Greek phrases appear in neighbouring conversations. Slavic dialects mingle naturally with Italian. A priest speaks Latin while recording several transactions involving church supplies. No one seems surprised by this variety. For centuries, these ports have served as meeting places where cultures overlap as naturally as tides. Near the edge of the square, an elderly mapmaker sits beneath a canvas awning. His table holds rolled charts weighted against the breeze by polished stones. Alvise greets him warmly. "You are still drawing the sea?" The old man smiles. "The sea changes less than rulers." They both laugh quietly. The mapmaker unrolls a recently completed chart showing parts of the southern Adriatic and Ionian waters. Its coastlines are carefully drawn, though not with perfect precision by modern standards. Small notes identify dependable anchorages, freshwater springs, dangerous reefs, seasonal winds. Alvise studies it thoughtfully before purchasing a copy. A good chart, he says as they leave, is not valuable because it is perfect. He rolls the parchment carefully. It is valuable because someone has tested it. Returning toward the harbour, you pass a small shipyard where craftsmen repair fishing boats beneath open wooden shelters. Fresh planks lie stacked beside half-finished hulls. One shipwright patiently shapes curved timber with an adze, removing thin curls of fragrant wood that fall softly onto the ground. Another heats pine resin to seal narrow gaps between planks. The scent of warm pitch fills the afternoon air. These workshops rarely appear in grand histories, yet, without them, merchants would never reach distant markets. Every great voyage quietly depends upon countless skilled hands remaining close to home. By late afternoon, the captain receives the news he had hoped to hear. Weather farther south remains favourable. Several merchant vessels arriving from Greece report calm crossings. No unusual difficulties have been encountered along the usual routes. Satisfied, preparations for departure begin once more. Fresh bread is loaded aboard while still warm from the oven. Additional onions, herbs, and several baskets of ripe grapes are carefully stored below deck. The cook thanks each supplier personally before checking every item against the provisions already aboard. As the sun begins lowering toward the western hills, the ship eases away from the quay. The harbour slowly recedes. Its warehouses, its workshops, its market, its quiet conversations, all become smaller until they blend gently into the surrounding coastline. Ahead, the sea opens once again. Somewhere beyond the southern horizon lies Corfu, one of the great stepping stones between the Adriatic and the Ionian Sea. Beyond Corfu waits Greece. Beyond Greece, the winding passages of the Aegean. And farther still, though still hidden beyond many peaceful days of travel, rises Constantinople, the city toward which every quiet mile has been carrying you since that first calm morning beside the canals of Venice. The sail fills once more. The shoreline slips slowly behind. Evening settles gently over the water. The ancient road across the sea continues. Morning arrives with a brilliance that feels different from every dawn since leaving Venice. The air is warmer now, and the light seems to linger longer upon the water before climbing into the sky. As the sun rises behind the eastern hills, the sea glows with layers of pale amber and soft blue, while the ship follows a steady course toward the southern end of the Adriatic. Behind you, the familiar chain of Dalmatian islands has gradually dissolved into the morning haze. Ahead, the waters widen once again, hinting that another great stretch of the Mediterranean is waiting to receive every vessel patient enough to cross it. The crew greets the day with the same quiet confidence that has become familiar over the past week. No morning aboard this ship begins with unnecessary haste. One sailor loosens a line that tightened during the coolness of the night. Another checks the leather coverings protecting several important documents stored beneath the captain's bench. Two younger crew members lower a bucket over the side, drawing seawater to rinse the deck before the sun grows strong enough to dry it almost immediately. Their work blends so naturally into the sounds of the sea that it becomes difficult to separate one from the other. Ulvi stands near the bow long before breakfast is served. He watches the changing horizon without speaking, his hands resting comfortably upon the smooth rail polished by many years of use. At length he gestures toward the broad expanse ahead. "Today," he says quietly, "we leave one sea behind and begin another." The words carry no sense of ceremony. To a sailor or merchant of the 15th century, seas are not separated by lines upon a map, but by changing winds, currents, coastlines, and traditions. The Adriatic has been a familiar companion since departing Venice. Soon the Ionian Sea will take its place, opening a wider path toward the eastern Mediterranean. Breakfast consists of warm bread baked the previous afternoon, dipped into olive oil, flavored with the herbs purchased in the coastal market. The thyme and oregano release their fragrance the moment they touch the warm oil, filling the morning air with scents that seem to belong perfectly to these southern shores. Fresh grapes gathered before yesterday's departure provide welcome sweetness, and the sailors eat them slowly, careful not to waste even the smallest cluster. As the meal ends, one of the younger sailors begins humming the same gentle working tune you first heard several evenings ago. Others quietly join him, while coiling spare rope and checking the rigging. The melody rises and falls with the rhythm of their movements, never loud enough to disturb the calm that settles naturally across the deck. By mid-morning, the coastline changes once more. The mountains become steeper, rising almost directly from the sea, their slopes clothed in dark cypress and pine. Here and there, pale cliffs interrupt the greenery, revealing the limestone beneath. High above the water, narrow paths trace uncertain routes along the hillsides, connecting villages too distant to be seen from the ship. The captain points toward one particularly high ridge. "On clear days," he says, "watchmen can see ships many hours before they reach the coast." Such watchmen have long served coastal communities. From these elevated places, they observed merchant fleets approaching with welcome cargo, fishing boats returning home before evening, or unfamiliar vessels whose intentions might require closer attention. Long before messages could travel quickly across great distances, a signal fire or a waving flag from a hilltop carried important news from one village to the next. The breeze strengthens gently from the northwest, filling the sail with renewed purpose. The ship responds eagerly, its bow cutting cleanly through the water. Small waves break softly against the hull before spreading outward in delicate patterns that vanish almost as soon as they appear. You notice Alvise watching the sail rather than the sea. "A good sail," he says, "is like a trusted companion." He smiles. "It never argues with the wind." His observations continue to emerge naturally from ordinary moments, never interrupting the journey but quietly deepening it. Around midday, another coastline begins appearing far to the southeast. At first it resembles nothing more than a faint shadow where sea and sky meet. Gradually the outline sharpens. The captain studies it carefully before nodding. Corfu. The island rises gently from the sea, its hills covered with olive trees whose silvery leaves shimmer beneath the midday sun. Unlike many of the rocky islands farther north, Corfu appears greener, its valleys richer, its slopes softened by deeper soil and more abundant rain. For centuries it has occupied an important place upon the routes linking the Adriatic with Greece and the eastern Mediterranean. Alves joins you beside the rail. "Many travellers think of islands as places apart," he says. I have always thought of them as bridges. Indeed, islands such as Corfu do not interrupt the sea road. They sustain it. Fresh water, shelter, repairs, provisions, and familiar faces have welcomed generations of merchants here, allowing longer journeys to continue safely. The captain chooses not to enter the main harbour immediately. Instead, the vessel follows the island's eastern shoreline where calmer water lies sheltered from the stronger winds of the open sea. Olive groves descend almost to the coast, interrupted occasionally by vineyards and small orchards. White stone houses appear among the trees, their red roofs glowing warmly beneath the afternoon light. From this distance, the sounds of the island do not reach the ship. Yet, its quiet presence changes the atmosphere of the voyage. The sea no longer feels endless. Land, once again, offers companionship. Several local fishing boats move slowly along the shoreline. Their crews cast wide circular nets that settle gently upon the water before sinking, beneath the surface. The movements are graceful, refined through countless repetitions rather than dramatic skill. One fisherman pauses briefly to adjust his broad straw hat before returning his attention to the sea. Alvise watches with quiet appreciation. My father used to say that fishermen understand patience better than merchants. And did you agree? He considers for a moment. Not until I became older. During the afternoon, the ship passes beneath cliffs where thousands of swallows have built their nests. They sweep gracefully above the water, changing direction so quickly that they seem almost carried by invisible threads. Their constant movement contrasts beautifully with the calm steadiness of the vessel below. Near one sheltered cove, you notice several monks walking slowly along a narrow path leading toward a small monastery, hidden among cypress trees. Its stone walls blend naturally into the surrounding hillside. A simple bell tower rises above the roof, modest, yet unmistakable. Monasteries such as these have long served travellers in many ways. Some preserve manuscripts copied patiently by hand. Others offer shelter to pilgrims or provide care for the sick. Many cultivate vineyards, orchards, and medicinal gardens whose knowledge passes quietly from one generation to the next. Alvise removes a small notebook from his travel chest. Its pages contain brief observations rather than lengthy accounts. Names of trustworthy warehouse keepers, the quality of wine purchased in one harbour, a reminder about fresh springs near another, the usual price of olive oil during different seasons. He writes one more line before closing the book. What did you write? You ask. He smiles. That the grapes from yesterday's harbour were particularly good. Nothing more. Even small memories deserve preserving. By late afternoon, the captain decides to anchor in a sheltered bay along Corfu's eastern coast, rather than continue through the night. The weather remains favourable, but there is no advantage in hurrying. Tomorrow's crossing into the Ionian Sea will be more comfortable after a restful evening. The anchor descends with a deep splash before its chain settles gently against the seabed below. Almost immediately, the ship becomes still. The subtle movement of sailing gives way to the quiet rocking of a vessel resting safely at anchor. Several sailors lower a small boat into the water. Alvise joins them, inviting you to come ashore for a short walk before sunset. The beach consists of smooth white stones warmed gently by the afternoon sun. As you step onto the shore, the scent of wild thyme rises beneath your feet. Olive trees cast long shadows across the hillside, their twisted trunks revealing centuries of slow growth. Cicadas sing steadily from the branches, filling the warm air with a sound that seems as timeless as the landscape itself. A narrow footpath leads inland between low stone walls built without mortar, each carefully balanced upon another. Small fields lie beyond them where families cultivate vegetables, figs, and vines suited to the Mediterranean climate. An elderly shepherd pauses beside the path while guiding his flock toward fresh grazing. Alvise greets him in Greek. Their conversation is brief. The shepherd speaks of recent rain. Alvise asks about the condition of the road leading toward the island's main settlement. They exchange quiet smiles before continuing their separate ways. No business takes place. No bargain is struck. Yet such simple conversations have always formed part of travel, reminding strangers that kindness often crosses borders more easily than goods. As the sun lowers toward the western horizon, you return slowly to the beach. The sea has become almost perfectly calm. The anchored ship reflects upon its surface with astonishing clarity. Smoke rises gently from a small cooking fire aboard, where the evening meal is already being prepared. Alvise pauses before stepping back into the waiting boat. He looks once toward the hills behind you, then toward the open sea stretching south. "When I was young," he says softly, "I believed every voyage was about reaching the destination." He waits a moment before continuing. "Now I think the road itself is the greater teacher." The boat glides quietly back toward the anchored vessel. Behind you, Corfu settles peacefully into evening. Ahead, beyond the southern horizon, the Ionian Sea waits with calm certainty, ready to carry you onward toward Greece, the Aegean, and the distant walls of Constantinople. The last light of the Mediterranean lingers upon the quiet water as the anchored ship rests beneath the olive-covered hills of Corfu. Around you, the gentle sounds of the evening settle into a familiar rhythm. The faint creak of timber, the distant call of seabirds returning to their nests, and the soft movement of water against the hull. Alvise remains beside the rail for a few moments, looking south toward the open sea. Beyond the horizon lie Greece, the winding passages of the Aegean, and, farther still, the magnificent walls of Constantinople. Yet, tonight, there is no need to hurry toward tomorrow. The road has never belonged only to destinations. Every quiet harbour has offered shelter. Every changing shoreline has carried its own lessons. Every market, every fisherman, every craftsman, every sailor has become part of a story much larger than any single voyage. You realize that the Mediterranean is more than a body of water. It is a living road, joining continents through patience rather than speed, through trust rather than certainty, and through countless ordinary journeys like this one. Long before maps grew detailed and borders became fixed, these waters quietly connected families, merchants, monasteries, scholars, and cities whose lives depended upon the steady movement of ships across the sea. As darkness gently covers the bay, lanterns begin to glow aboard nearby vessels, each one marking another traveller preparing for the next day's passage. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other merchants are setting sail from distant ports, while others are arriving safely after weeks upon the water. The journey never truly ends. It simply continues, with different travellers, different seasons, and different winds. You take one last slow breath of the cool evening air, carrying the scent of salt, pine, and warm stone. The waves beneath the ship rise and fall with quiet certainty, just as they have for countless generations before this one. The stars appear one by one above the Mediterranean, guiding those who still sail through the night, just as they guided Alvices of Venice centuries ago. And as the sea settles into silence, you allow yourself to rest, carrying with you the peaceful memory of an ancient road that joined worlds not through conquest or spectacle, but through patience, craftsmanship, curiosity, and the simple courage to keep moving gently forward. Good night.